Andrea Pazzo paints the ceiling of a church called Sant'Ignazio. Sant'Ignazio is a barrel-vaulted church, and they hire Pazzo to create a painting on the ceiling using a method called trompe-l'oeil. Now, you've heard of trompe-l'oeil before. We talked about it when we talked about the Renaissance. Remember, trompe-l'oeil is the illusion of a three-dimensional space. It's taking a two-dimensional space, in this case a slightly rounded barrel vault, and turning it into an amazing three-dimensional space. Pazzo's trompe-l'oeil actually creates the illusion of a ceiling about 100 feet higher than the existing ceiling. If you look, the ceiling actually begins right above those windows at the side and extends upward only a few feet in a gentle curved barrel vault. But standing underneath and looking up at the ceiling, it appears as if it is a skylight into heaven. It erases that divider between physical and spiritual. It opens up for the people in the church this idea that heaven is right there looking down on them. There is this immediate personal connection for them that the Catholic Church, the Baroque era, is so interested in promoting. They are interested in creating this sense of immediate connection and reminding people that the Catholics also believe that God touches the lives of ordinary people, that there is a personal connection, that that is not merely a Protestant idea. The trompe-l'oeil at Sant'Ignazio is really, really amazing. It creates that illusion of the ceiling going up far higher than it does. And it's ironic because it covers the entire barrel vaulted ceiling over there to the dome on your left. Now here's the fun part. The people who live in the neighborhood where this church is, Sant'Ignazio, are typical apartment holders. People don't change no matter what century it is. When they decide to remodel Sant'Ignazio and build a huge dome on one end of the church, they are flooded with complaints from local apartment owners. If they put a dome on the church, it's going to make their views obstructed, and they're going to lose money on their apartments, and the church just can't do that. They're not allowed to do that. They're going to block the view. Forget it. Can't do it. So what they do is they hire Andrea Pazzo. You know what he does? He creates a trompe-l'oeil dome. You know that dome you're looking at on the left side of your screen? It's a fake. It's just a painting of a dome on a slightly curved ceiling. No, I'm not kidding. Look at it from a different angle. That dome is simply an optical illusion, and yet it is so beautifully created by Pazzo and his trompe-l'oeil that it appears to soar upward to a great height. These Counter-Reformation artists are trying to show the connection between individuals and God. They're trying to show the church's ties with history and heritage. And they're trying to show the massive strength and solidity of the church. Among those artists is a painter named Peter Paul Rubens. Now, be careful. If you're going to Google search this guy, make sure you Google search Peter Paul Rubens. If you Google search Paul Rubens, you're going to end up with Pee Wee Herman, and that's the wrong dude. All right. Now, Rubens here is a painter who starts out being raised Protestant. His family converts to Catholic, and Rubens becomes one of the most passionate advocates in art of the Counter-Reformation and the return to a unified Catholic Church. Rubens wants to emphasize the power, the strength, and the solidity of the church, and he finds inspiration in two big things, literally big. One, Michelangelo's figures. You remember Michelangelo's Terra Bellita, those massive, awe-inspiring figures? And second of all, Rubens' second wife, who happens to be a very large lady. Rubens' paintings frequently center on women. But those women are large, impressive figures, far more like Michelangelo's men. There's actually an adjective applied to these figures. They're called Rubenesque because of their massiveness, because of their size. These very large, solid figures ground Rubens' work in a sense of tradition, reality, and massive strength. And yet, at the same time, they fit on Rubens' canvases. If you ever get to see a real Rubens, if any of you guys go down to the Sarasota Museum, the Ringling Museum of Fine Arts, you'll see a series of Rubens. And there's something you got to understand when you look at a Rubens. A Rubens painting is typically 12 to 20 feet. It is not a small piece of artwork. It is huge and massive because it supports the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church supports a very public religion. So the artworks are going to be very large and displayed publicly, usually in churches. Whenever Rubens paints, he borrows that sense of massive, important, vital, huge imagery. This is actually the Descent from the Cross, and in the center image you see Jesus being taken down off the cross, his body being removed. On the left-hand side you see Mary meeting the prophetess Anna, who recognizes the child Jesus in Mary's womb. On the right-hand side you see baby Jesus being blessed by another figure at the temple, recognizing Jesus' future. What you're seeing here is Rubens borrowing from Michelangelo. Look at the massive body of Christ, these very large figures. He's borrowing that sense of awe, that sense of terribilità in his figures. And he's also borrowing the idea of light and shadow from other Counter-Reformation artists like Caravaggio. He's certainly capturing that moment, being caught in a moment. Look at the poses on that central panel. Remember, people had to hold these poses for hours at a time while they were sketched. You would not want to be posed as Jesus is there, because it would be extremely uncomfortable, and yet it gives that illusion of being caught in a moment, freeze-framing an image in motion, which is what the Counter-Reformation, the Baroque, is interested in, and it's what Rubens is trying to capture. Rubens not only does religious scenes, he also does scenes from Greek and Roman mythology. Like this. This is the rape of the daughters of Leucippus. In the story, two brothers, Castor and Pollux, decide to kidnap and rape the daughters of a nearby ruler. You'll see the depiction of very Rubenesque women. They're large women. And yet Rubens creates a sense of movement and grace. There is a smooth, arcing curve that comes from the upper left of the painting down through the center and into the bottom center of the painting. There's a sense of grace in movement regardless of the size of the figures that Rubens is the master of. He combines that massive tradition, that weight, with a sense of grace and beauty, just as the Catholic Church tries to combine the power of God with the beauty of individual creation and individual relationship. So in art, Baroque art should be dramatic and eye-catching. Remember, it's a part of the Counter-Reformation propaganda campaign. They want to bring people back to the church. They want to win their attention and their hearts. So they are going to make these paintings very large, very dramatic. They're going to be displayed in a public location, frequently the church, because the Catholics want to win people back with art. They know the Protestants have the translations of the Bible, but you know what they don't have? They don't have pictures. So the Catholic Church is going to create huge artworks that are very large and put them in very public places. Those artworks are going to focus on church traditions and faith, as well as Greek and Roman myths. And the artworks are going to support the idea of kings, princes, and popes as being in their place because of the blessing of God. And it's also going to showcase those figures as being important and blessed by God. They want to keep that traditional feudal system going. It's important that you keep in mind that when you see a massive sculpture, something huge, or a painting that's 14 feet wide, most of the time you can look at it and go, oh, that's going to be Counter-Reformation. That's going to be Catholic. Simply because Catholic is large and public. Protestant tends to be small and private. So if it's big, huge, and it won't fit in your bathroom, most likely it's Catholic. If it's big, huge, won't fit in your bathroom, and includes a saint, dude, it's Catholic. No questions asked, all right? It is a Catholic work of art. It is a Baroque Counter-Reformation work of art intended as a tool to help win people back to being loyal to the Catholic Church. Now, up north, things are different. The North is dominated by the Protestants, and for the Protestants, artworks are not intended to go into the church. They're intended to go into their homes. So the artworks are going to be smaller. They're going to be personal and private, things like portraits, morality lessons. The focus is going to be very different. Most of the paintings are not going to be religious in nature. Most of them are going to be secular. They're going to focus on public things, not on religious topics. And many of them are going to focus on the ideas of home and family rather than people floating on clouds or focusing on church themes. Instead, they're going to focus on home, family, and personal because they are Northern, they're Protestant. Their focus is different than the Catholic Church's focus. They're not interested in promoting the power of the Pope and a church hierarchy. Instead, they're interested in promoting people working hard, taking civic responsibility, and taking care of their homes and family. Perhaps the best example of this Northern Reformation style is the toothpaste guy, Rembrandt. Now, Rembrandt is a Northern artist. He works some in painting, some in reproducible artworks. Rembrandt throughout his life creates over 60 self-portraits. You can see 3 of them here. They give us an insight into Rembrandt's life, but they also give us an insight into Rembrandt's personality. Why does he paint 60 self-portraits? Is it because he likes himself that much? No, actually. It's just that Rembrandt is slightly obsessive-compulsive. Whenever Rembrandt is awake and not busy, he's painting. That's what he does. And it's a good thing because Rembrandt likes to live a bit beyond his means. Rembrandt is in and out of bankruptcy court on multiple occasions. And Rembrandt wants to paint portraits. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, what do you paint a portrait of? There's no one to be your model. You paint a portrait of yourself. Yeah, and that's exactly what Rembrandt does. Those portraits tell us a number of things. For one thing, they show Rembrandt's style. Rembrandt's typical style uses oil paints, and he creates a remarkable effect with his oil paints. He uses very bright colors, whites, brilliant yellows, oranges, in the background at the base on the canvas, and then he'll layer 20 or 30 micro-thin layers of other colored paint so that it appears there's a glow or a light coming through the picture, and it creates a truly breathtaking effect. Now, Rembrandt does use a variety of styles. He's very talented, and basically Rembrandt pays whatever they pay him to paint because Rembrandt is interested in making money. He needs it to stay out of bankruptcy court. When you look at Rembrandt's works, when you look at Rembrandt's paintings, you can see his flexibility and the diversity of his styles. For example, these 2 portraits are both by Rembrandt, and yet they're so different from one another. The woman on your left-hand side is a Rembrandt portrait that is almost photorealistic in its detail. Every detail of her, from her wrinkles to her bags under her eyes to the folds on her collar, is beautifully and perfectly rendered in detail. It almost looks like photos. That kind of detail Rembrandt is capable of providing. On your right-hand side, there's a portrait of a gentleman, and that portrait is very simplistic in many places. It's stylized. The paint is slathered onto the surface. Which is Rembrandt's style? Yes. Rembrandt is able to change his style depending on what people request of him because he is fascinated with the different ways that paint can be used to create a sense of reality. Now, Rembrandt, however, does not actually spend most of his time working with paintings. Actually, Rembrandt spends a lot of his time and makes a lot of his money using etchings and engravings. This is actually one of his engravings. Rembrandt loves making reproducible artwork because it allows him to make a good bit of money because he can just make 100 copies of the image that you're looking at. It's an unlimited run of artwork. Now, with Rembrandt's reproducible artwork, Rembrandt finds a way to make even more money than he does with his engravings. He begins on etchings. Now, the etching you're looking at is actually Mark III of the Rembrandt's etching of the Crucifixion. Remember, etching uses a large flat piece of metal coated in wax, and then you draw through the wax with a stylus exposing the metal, and you dunk it into acid. All right. Now, when you look at the painting, etching rather, you're seeing the third version of this. The original version contained Jesus on a cross in the center in a spotlight with almost no one around him. The second version included one of the two crucified thieves, and the third version includes a third thief and a number of other people gathered around the cross. Rembrandt actually does 7 of these. He keeps going on and making tweaks, improvements, and changes to them. Why does he do that? Well, because Rembrandt can make more money every time he releases a new issue or a new run of etchings. So basically, he's taking what he's already got, adding to it, calling it a new edition, and reselling it. To put it in our terms, you know, when they put out a DVD of a movie, then they put out the special edition DVD, then they put out the special edition director's cut, then they put out the special Blu-ray, then they put out the director's edition Blu-ray. They keep trying to milk you for more money for the same movie, only with new extras and new packaging. That's what Rembrandt is doing with his etchings. By making 7 copies of this etching, all slightly different from one another, Rembrandt is able to make himself 7 times the money with minimal effort, because it's always the same metal plate. It's always the same etching. He just keeps scraping away more and more of the surface to create his images. Now, Rembrandt works for just about anyone who will pay him. And he actually ends up working for a local militia, creating one of his most memorable pieces. Here you see Rembrandt creating a biblical scene. Story from the Bible. This is Jacob, the elderly man on your left, is blessing his grandsons. He's saying goodbye. He's giving them his last wishes. Behind him, the guy in the most excellent turban is his son Joseph, and the lady on your right is Joseph's wife. This is a Bible story, and if we were seeing this painting in the Catholic regions, this painting would be huge. There would be floating angels, maybe a saint or two or an angel in the background for good luck. You would have a huge, incredible piece that would show Joseph and Jacob as kings, or it would show how they were touched by God in some way. You would have some sort of a special portrayal of them that would show the connection between God and ordinary people to promote the ideas of the Counter-Reformation. Instead, this painting is being done by Rembrandt in the Protestant North. It's probably going in someone's living room in their home, because Protestants are iconoclasts. They don't do artwork in churches. So what you're seeing here is a family scene. This is a family saying goodbye to their granddad. If you look at the faces, look at where each person is looking, look at their eye lines. No one's looking out at you. There is no sense of public display. They're appearing. No. This is a private family moment that you're glimpsing, you're looking in on. They are not aware of you, and you are getting an image of this personal family, this care of saying goodbye to a granddad, the importance of family values, caring for and treasuring one's family. How Protestant of them. Now, as I said before, Rembrandt actually gets hired for a number of jobs. Religious paintings like this, Bible scene, and very non-religious paintings like this. This is one of Rembrandt's best-known pieces. It is called The Night Watch. It is actually a painting commissioned by a group of local militiamen. Basically, these are guys who are volunteer neighborhood watch. They are left at home in the town while the official police force goes off to fight off a bunch of Spanish invaders who live in a town nearby. They go off to help the neighboring town, leaving the militia at home, and lo and behold, the Spanish show up in their hometown. The militiamen manage to repel the Spanish, to fight off the Spanish, and they are so proud of the fact that they saved their hometown that all of them pitch in some cash to hire Rembrandt in order to make an image of their victory. This is basically a group portrait. Today we'd line everybody up on a flight of stairs, tallest in the back, shortest in the front. We'd take a photograph and we'd put everyone's name across the picture. They can't do that, so they hire Rembrandt to create a big picture. It's 14 feet wide, 11 feet tall. to create a big picture commemorating their victory, so that they can show their pride, and every single one of them gets his portrait done by Rembrandt. Now, this painting is big. It's one of the Protestant ones that I can show you that is as large as the Catholic paintings. Why? Well, because it's intended to go on the wall of the militiaman's house, kind of like the wall of their meeting place. This very large picture, you can see that with the person standing in front of the soldiers. This very large picture is intended to be impressive. It is intended to fill the wall of their chapter house and to impress anyone else who walks in with their bravery and this group portrait they've had done of themselves. Now, we actually call this the Night Watch, but for the record, the Night Watch has had a tough time. Originally, the painting was larger than it is now. You can see the lines, that's where it was actually cut down to. And the painting itself was also covered in a resin coating in order to make the colors brighter. The problem is, over time, that resin browned, cracked, and actually made the painting look extremely dark and difficult to see. Because of that, it became known as the Night Watch, even though in the original it was quite a bright and clear painting intended to represent the local militiamen coming out of the background, out of a building and into the bright daylight. All right. However, daylight suddenly got turned to moonlight, and we started calling it the Night Watch because of the darkness. There are a number of details in the painting that are worth noting. Again, a lot of them go back to the idea that this was commissioned as a group portrait for these local militiamen. Some things just remain mysterious, though. For example, that little glowing girl on the right-hand side is mysterious. We have no idea what she actually represents or what she's doing there. On her waist, she actually has a chicken, a dead chicken, secured to her waistband. That dead chicken is a reference to the muskets carried by these local militiamen. These guys are called arquebusiers, and the chicken, the name of the claws of the chicken, actually references arquebusier. Now, we also believe that that short little figure striding to the right-hand side with the poofy pants, who is actually wearing a Spanish helmet, may represent the Spanish troops that these guys won a victory over. But again, we don't know that. Rembrandt was too busy painting and trying to make his money, and the militiamen certainly didn't tell us what the symbolism of these figures were. We do know, though, if you look in the picture on the left, that is actually a shield mounted on the wall in the background of the painting. And that shield is actually a list of all the names of the men in the painting. So in other words, it's actually, today if we took a photograph, Greek group picture, we would list at the bottom of the photograph from left to right, and we would list everybody's names. That's what that is. It's a list of the names of all the militiamen that are in the portrait, so that they will be remembered and their names are honored in the painting as the defenders of their hometown and their home village. The Night Watch is secular. It is not a religious piece. It does not honor a king or a prince. It does not reinforce the traditional feudal system. Instead, it is a Protestant artwork, looking at a much more secular, more political, less religious world. It celebrates the triumph of a small, personal group of guys who paid for these portraits on their own. More and more, Protestant Reformation art is going to be focusing on personal, private, secular, less and less on grand, traditional, and Catholic. That's going to be your Southern, your Catholic artwork. For example, this is one of the world's simplest titled paintings. It's called Woman Reading a Letter. It's by an artist named Jan Vermeer, and it's called Woman Reading a Letter because guess what's in the painting? A woman reading a letter. Imagine that. Now, Vermeer doesn't name this painting, by the way. A bunch of people walk by, see it, and they name the painting after what they see in the painting. So that's how you get Woman Reading a Letter. Now, Vermeer here is painting a scene that is very, very Protestant in nature. It is an indoor scene in someone's house. There's a giant map hanging on the wall We don't know what the story is. We don't need to know. That's not what Protestant artwork is about. Protestant artwork is not going to reference Greek mythology or necessarily a story of the life of a saint or a Bible story even. Instead, it's going to be a personal, private, intimate moment. In Woman Reading a Letter, you see a woman. If you look at the table in front of her, there's a hairbrush and a necklace made of pearls on the table. It appears that she was fixing herself up for the day, and she began reading a letter, and whatever was in that letter was so dramatic that it made her suddenly stand up, pushing the chair back behind her. What was in that letter? What does it relate to? We don't know. Many people have speculated. Many people have been fascinated with the mystery, supposing perhaps her husband is away in war, symbolized by the map in the background. We don't know what it was. We don't even know if she's pregnant or that's just the style of the time. And yet, this very intimate, indoor moment fascinates people. It's infinitely Protestant. It's a reasonably small painting, intended to go into a home. You don't buy this because it has deep religious meaning. You buy it because you like it. It's pretty. There is this new sensibility, this new way of looking at things that emphasizes that sense of personal and of private in a different way. Most of Vermeer's paintings reflect that sensibility, that very Protestant way of looking at things. For example, this is another Vermeer called The Alchemist. There is, again, this sense of almost looking through a peephole into someone's home. It's a private, internal scene focused on how the light falls across it. You buy this painting because you like it. There's something about it that calls to you. Not because it has some deep meaning or you want to earn heavenly brownie points by putting it in a church. There's a shift here over more and more to personal, to people buying art and creating art on a personal level instead of just doing it for the church or just doing it because of their desire to earn favor with God. Now there's one side trip here we have to make. We haven't really talked so far in this class very much about music because there really hasn't been a lot of music to talk about. Most music up to this point has really been one of two things. Either it has been the kind of stuff you sing in bars, which is not something you really want to preserve for your children and your great-grandchildren, or it has been religious music written by monks who believe that it is a sin of pride to take credit for music. So, and I'm serious, I'm not joking. We actually have composers in history that we call Anonymous the First, Anonymous the Second, and Anonymous the Third. Because we know one little dude, one little monk wrote these pieces of music, but we don't know what his name was because he considered it a sin to sign his music. So this is all written by that dude, Anonymous. Now, for the first time here, in the late 1500s, we're going to start getting guys who actually sign their music. So I can actually play you a little bit of music. Now, one of the things that really gets artists to start taking credit for their musical compositions are these doohickey thingies you're looking at. These are pipe organs. Pipe organs are awesome. They're as much architecture as they are musical instrument. These massive collections of pipes are powered by a single keyboard. And basically, to put this really, really simplified, they're giant collections of whistles. Those whistles are all controlled by a central keyboard, and the way that they work is very complex. Each row of whistles is controlled by whether or not you let air in to make the whistles blow. These whistles, by the way, range in size from perhaps a ½ inch in diameter to 8 to 10 inches, sometimes more in diameter. The airflow to these whistles is actually controlled by a flat board placed underneath the row of pipes, under the row of whistles. That pipe actually has a board at the bottom, and the board is alternating flat spaces and holes. When the person sitting at the keyboard pulls out a knob called a stop, it slides the board to the side. When the holes in the board line up with the bottom of the pipes, air can go through the pipes and you get a sound. It whistles. The pipe organ is played. When the stop is closed, the flat area of the board blocks off the airflow into the pipe. No sound comes out of that row of pipes, and that row of pipe is not played. Now, a pipe organ is a complex instrument, and when these people in the 1500s and 1600s begin to learn to play these pipe organs, they are very proud, and let me show you why. These are keyboards of pipe organs. Yeah, you see that right. Pipe organs often have between 6 and 7 keyboards, multiple keyboards to be played with the hands and a keyboard to be played with the feet. Each different keyboard can be used to play a different row of pipes, a different row of whistles to make a different sound. The organist must be able to keep track of and control all of those keyboards, know which stops, see all those buttons around the keyboard, which stops to push and pull to get the sound that they want, and be able to handle the stops and the keyboard with their feet. So sometimes a keyboardist, an organist, will be playing 3 different rows of keys at the same time, one with each hand and one with their feet. This takes skill. You'll very rarely see a fat pipe organ player. When you actually see someone play a pipe organ, this is something that requires years of training, practice, and talent to do it. And therefore, these artists are proud of what they can do. And when they are given the opportunity, they want credit for their compositions on the pipe organ itself. The first of these composers I want to introduce you to is a fellow by the name of Johann Sebastian Bach. Yes, he's German. What do you ask? Now, Johann Sebastian Bach comes from a rather large family. There are a number of boys, and every single boy in the family is named Johann Bach. They just have different names. So you have Johann Christian, Johann Wilhelm, Johann Sebastian. This is J.S. This is Johann Sebastian Bach. J.S. has a gift for keyboard instruments from the time he's a kid, from the time he's tiny. And he loves playing keyboards, harpsichords, organs, and so on. Bach actually, when he grows up, becomes an expert on a pipe organ, and he's an amazing pipe organ player. But he can't keep a job. He keeps getting himself fired, simply because he's a really good pipe organ player. And Bach loves playing fancy stuff on a pipe organ. The problem is, he gets hired as an organist to play in the background for people to sing along. And he's doing all this fancy stuff. He's like doing all these riffs on the keyboard. And the people who are supposed to be singing the songs are going, "What the heck is that guy doing? I don't even know where I am in the song. I don't know what I'm supposed to be singing. That guy's making me crazy." And he keeps getting fired because he's too fancy. He can't just play what they're supposed to be singing. Bach continues going from town to town looking for work until finally he gets a job at a small chapel under the care of a master of music called a Kapellmeister. Bach finds himself quite attracted to the Kapellmeister's daughter, and one day the music master comes into the church to find Bach and his daughter in the organ loft, and his daughter is playing the pipes. Yeah, there's kind of a sort of a shotgun wedding, and Bach ends up keeping his job because he's the boss's son-in-law. Now, Bach creates some amazing pieces on the pipe organ. I'm going to require that you listen to one of them. And Bach tends to specialize in pieces called toccatas. Now, toccata is not a type of stinky cheese. A toccata is actually a show-off piece that's intended to show off how good the organist is. And what I really want you to listen for in Bach, as you listen to the toccata and fugue in D minor, I want you to listen for Bach's ability to control the different sets of pipes on the pipe organ. When someone plays the toccata and fugue from Bach, they have pauses in the music. You'll hear pauses between the musical phrases. And what you're hearing is actually the person desperately, crazily pulling and pushing stops to control which sets of pipes actually play during the musical piece. Bach's compositions set a new standard, and Bach takes credit for them. Unlike earlier artists who would have considered it a sin to take credit for musical composition, Bach proudly takes credit for his musical compositions because he is not only composing for God and brownie points, He is composing to get himself a reputation. Individuality, humanism, choose who you want to be. It's starting to come over into the world of music, and Bach is one of the first composers who really puts it to good use. Another important composer is a gentleman named Vivaldi. Now, if Bach specializes in pipe organ pieces, Vivaldi actually specializes in the violin. Again, as you listen to Vivaldi, pay attention to the delicate work of the violins and how the violins interact with each other in the music. Vivaldi actually has a job as well, and his job is looking after an orphanage, a foundling hospital. Now, we talked briefly when we talked about Henry VIII of how the king viewed himself as being more important than normal people and how he viewed himself as higher on the chain of being. Well, that sense of self-importance really applies to most nobility in this time period. We'll get back to that in about a lecture and a half. These nobility felt that they could do whatever they wanted to because they were a little higher than other people, and that involved simply calling over servants whenever they felt like having sex. So there are a lot of illegitimate children who are the illegitimate children of wealthy nobility. Those children are left at orphanages. They're called foundling hospitals because many of them literally have shelves outside the door of the orphanage. And in the morning, the people who work there go out and check the shelves to see if there are any children that are found that morning, thus foundlings or orphans. Vivaldi works at an all-girl foundling hospital, and he specializes in teaching these little girls how to play beautiful new compositions on the violin. His foundling hospital makes a good bit of money because these little girls hold concerts. And of course the people who come to the concerts are their illegitimate parents who have guilty consciences, who spend money paying for these concerts and training these little girls so that they can actually do something when they grow up, and their illegitimate mothers and fathers will not feel quite so guilty about having ditched their children. Vivaldi is the master of stringed instruments, and again, he takes full credit for his personal compositions. He doesn't want other people just playing them without giving Vivaldi credit. Vivaldi is an artist, and he's not just interested in serving the church. He's also interested in fame. He's interested in getting his name and his reputation out there. But perhaps the best example of this idea of a musician as an artist and a musician as a valuable asset is another German, a fellow by the name of George Friedrich Handel. Now, let me wipe my microphone off after I said that. Now, Handel is a German composer. Now, that may seem weird to you because most of you, if you know anything about Handel, you know Handel's Messiah. You know the Hallelujah Chorus. Originally, Handel is actually a German gentleman, German composer, and he works not for the church. He works for a wealthy German elector, a German nobleman, dude with money and commerce. In this world, and this is so hard for us to wrap our heads around, you've got to remember something that is not true for us here. In the time period that Bach, Vivaldi, Handel lived, this is a world where there is no recording equipment. None. The only way you get to hear music is when people play it, when people sing it, when people perform it. That's hard for us because we live in a world that is so saturated by music. You go to the grocery store, you know what? There's background music. You're driving in the car, you flip on the radio, there's music. You're out somewhere, you have your MP3 player or your smartphone with your MP3s on it to listen to. You have CDs. You have so much music available to you. You can have music whenever and wherever you want. Imagine if that was gone. Imagine if you had no way of ever hearing music except in live performance. Do you know how important and amazing live performance would be? Some people listen to the music in this course, Bach, Vivaldi, Handel, and they go, oh my gosh, it's so boring. How could somebody listen to that for 8 minutes? And I really understand that because it's not the kind of music we have nowadays. It doesn't have a beat and you can't dance to it. But imagine living in a world where there is no music unless you sing. Imagine how amazing it would be to hear that music performed live. What would seem boring to us would be absolutely fascinating and special to people from that time period. They live in a different mental world. Getting to hear that music, they're not going to get bored in 8 minutes. They're going to love every bit of that 8 minutes because they haven't heard any music in 4 months. Handel actually works for a wealthy German elector. And Handel is luxury, okay? Handel is like this dude's personal MP3 player. Whenever this guy wants music, he sends for Handel. I mean, he doesn't have a recorded music, so he just sends for his composer. Write me something. Poof. And it happens. Now, this German elector hears that the Queen of England is single, and the Queen of England's favorite thing in the world is music. So, in this time period, when you care enough to send the very best, you just send her a person. You send her a composer. He sends the Queen of England Handel. Here you go. He'll write music for you. Love ya. Yeah. Anyway, Handel moves to England. He learns to speak English. Handel writes a number of musical compositions. Some of them are operas. Now, I know, you're going, opera, yawn. But in the 1500s and early 1600s, opera is like the hottest thing ever. Mostly because most music up to this point was either the stuff you sing in bars, not cool, or it was church music. So opera is live performance, drama with music, and it's about naughty stuff. If you know the plots of any operas, you know most of them are about who's sleeping with whom, and occasionally what gender is that person. That kind of stuff was hot stuff in this time period. Doubly so because, well, both male and female parts were sung by men, and quite frequently those foundlings, those orphans, when they found a young boy who had a beautiful voice, a very beautiful high, what we would call a choir boy voice, frequently that boy was purchased. They would give money to the orphanage or to his family to get custody of that young boy, and they would actually remove his testicles. They would castrate him in order to maintain that pure high voice, so his voice would never drop. And those boys, called castrati, were then the stars of the opera scene. Handel writes opera. Handel writes religious works called oratorio. That's what the Messiah is. It's verses from the Bible set to music, performed in a dramatic setting. And Handel writes music like the piece I'm going to have you listen to. It's called water music, and it's going to put you to sleep. That's okay. That water music is commissioned by the Queen from Handel for her garden party. All right, what's going on? Well, imagine, okay? There is a big garden party. All these wealthy British nobles are wandering around in the garden, and there are these big, beautiful fountains. Now, if you've ever been to the Bellagio in Vegas, or you've seen the dancing fountain at Epcot down in Orlando, you have seen a dancing fountain. It's a fountain, nowadays they're computer controlled, where the water rises and falls based on coordination with music. Well, the Queen of England has one of those bad boys. The thing is, hers is not powered by computer or pumps. It's powered by a bunch of little servant with pumps going push, 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 push. She has Handel actually write water music. Music that's played by a live orchestra in the background while the water goes up and down and dances to the music he writes. Handel is required to write another piece called fireworks music. Guess what? It's supposed to be played in the background while they set off. Fireworks! Handel is the background music dude. That's what he does for a living. And again, why am I telling you this? Because I'm emphasizing a shift here. In the Protestant regions, kings and princes have their own stuff. They have their own composers. They don't simply go to church to hear the music. Church is moving away from the center of life. We're beginning to get much more secular artwork, and we will return to that with the beginnings of that secular focus on kings and princes and their power actually showing up in artwork, even in Catholic countries like Spain, like with Velázquez, Las Meninas, and we'll return to that in the next lecture.